A special surprise guest.
Yeah.
All right, we are good to go.
All right, it is 6:31. We'll go ahead and get started. I don't see any citizens here today, so we're just going to jump right into the agenda. So the first item is consider approving minutes from February 12th meeting and take appropriate action.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes are approved. And the next item is we are going to receive a presentation from the city stormwater engineer who has graciously agreed to join us. So we're gonna.
We're very captivated on captivated.
Exciting.
All right.
You think we're joking?
You guys are drinking.
You're like very much.
Yeah. Very corporate, very, yeah,
Very business.
business casual. Yeah, go with the business casual in the dictionary. We look right now. All right. So thanks for having me out. My name is Eric Mueller. I am the city's stormwater engineer. And I heard you guys have a request to learn a little bit more about stormwater management in our city and what my role might be in kind of all of that. Slide, there's a little bit about me. So I already said my name and stuff, but I'm a professional engineer in Texas. I'm also a certified floodplain manager. I got my degree in civil engineering from Valparaiso University.
Go Vikings.
Huh?
Go Vikings.
Yeah, it's a high school, right?
No, is it Valparaiso Vikings? Isn't that you guys' mascot?
No, it's the Beacons now. It used to be the Crusaders.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
It's actually you were still right though. It's the high school's mascot actually. But got my degree there, and then I came to DFW Metroplex. I spent 5 years at Kimley Horn in their hydraulics and hydrology team. So that's my background from a technical standpoint before I joined the city as of July of this past year. I'm also a Farmers Branch resident, so
Awesome.
it's neat for me to see a group like this exist, be active. It's really quite neat. But yeah, my wife and I moved here back in August with our dog Gumbo. We've been happy to be here, so it's been really fun. And my contact info is down at the bottom there. I don't know if you guys will get a copy of the slides or you guys have access to it. If you guys have any questions about stormwater related stuff, I'm happy to discuss and give you guys some more background about what we do. And if you have questions, I'm here to answer them. So, okay, slide. Okay, so to kind of break up kind of my responsibilities and what stormwater encompasses in the big picture in the city, it's easier to break things up into two different buckets per se. One is floodplain and drainage, and the other bucket is stormwater quality. Next slide. We're going to focus on floodplain and drainage first, and then we'll hit stormwater quality next. So when it comes to floodplain and drainage, what are our responsibilities? What are my responsibilities? What are the city's responsibilities when it comes to these items? So I'm going to kind of work my way around the circle here. So starting in the top corner up here, FEMA floodplain regulation. So I don't know how familiar you guys might or might not be about floodplain, especially FEMA floodplain, but FEMA has what are called floodplain maps or flood insurance rate maps. And on these maps, they have delineated either through modeling methods or approximation the limits of floodplains, which is basically how wide does the water get around our creeks during a really big storm event. And they use these maps to determine flood insurance rates and to regulate development in these flood-prone areas. Part of our responsibility as a city is we have to help FEMA enforce their regulations for our residents to be able to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. If we didn't participate in that, then our citizens would not have access to flood insurance, which would be a very bad thing, because flooding is very dangerous. So we have to keep an eye on our floodplains. We have to make sure if somebody is proposing to develop inside these floodplains that they go through the proper permitting procedures. A lot of times it looks like doing a detailed technical study that we would review, or if it's very detailed, have a technical consultant help us review to make sure that it wouldn't adversely impact neighboring properties or themselves in the case that something gets built. So kind of moving down from FEMA floodplain regulation to local drainage regulations, on top of what we have to do for FEMA, we have a lot of our own drainage criteria. And we've got a whole stormwater criteria manual dedicated to these rules and regulations. But those regulations kind of focus on the more local picture. So think stormwater detention requirements. Think, how do we size our storm sewers in our streets? How do we want them sized? What are the techniques we want our designers to design them to? What level of standard we want to have there, amongst other items. And then we have drainage capital improvements. So one of my responsibilities is figuring out where we have drainage issues and where we should do projects to try to fix them and do capital projects. A lot of our projects when it comes to drainage, since we're so built out, a lot of it is either upgrading or repairing old infrastructure or repairing erosion damage along our creeks. And then stormwater utility management. Since you guys are all residents, you've all seen your utility bill. You probably see that little stormwater line up. So what that line pays into is a stormwater utility fund, which helps us pay for our capital improvement projects as well as our studies and helps us regulate our development. And so none of our funding for these projects comes out of the general fund. It's all funded through this stormwater utility. So that $5 or $7 or $3, whatever you've got based on your tier, goes to that fund to help us pay for these projects. And so as a part of trying to manage that, we have to make sure that we're billing everybody appropriately. What do we bill based off of? We bill based off of impervious area. So residential properties, you all fall within 3 different tiers. One is like less than 3,000 square feet of impervious area. Then there's kind of a middle tier, and then there's an upper tier. And that's based on different amounts of imperviousness on your residential lot. For commercial properties, we have unique billing rates for each property based on the amount of impervious area. So as a part of that, we have to update GIS layers, constantly reassess how much development there has been in the city over the past couple of years when we get new aerial imagery to make sure our billing data sets are up to date. And the last piece on that is evaluating our stormwater rates, making sure they're still appropriate to pay for the projects that we need to do. Go ahead. Next. Here's just a couple of things that pop up on my screen on a day-to-day basis, just to give you what my days look like. Top corner, furthest away from me, that's a snip of the FEMA National Flood Hazard Layer. So this is where you can see the floodplain that FEMA says is there. This is kind of in the area south of City Hall. You can kind of see City Hall up there. And you can access, if you're curious to see where floodplain areas are, this National Flood Hazard Layer is on a web viewer that you can look up. If you're curious to see what's in the floodplain and what's not around the city or elsewhere, it's kind of fun. At least I think it's fun. This right here is a snip from a plan set for some gabion walls that were installed along Farmers Branch Creek. This is an example of a CIP project we've done relatively recently, as well as in the bottom corner over there, we had to repair the concrete foundation, more or less, for the culvert crossing. That's Valley View and Rawhide Creek. over by City Hall. It was structurally degrading and needed to be replaced. That's another capital improvement project paid out of the Stormwater Utility Fund. And this is just a snip from our criteria manual for drainage regulations. But there's a lot more pages to it than just that. Okay, next slide. So now I'll cover stormwater quality. Oh, sure.
Do you get, does the city get any money from the federal government or state?
Yes. So we recently did the Cokes Creek channel project. That was assisted through federal funds that we applied to through TDEM, Texas Department of Emergency Management, to get those funds. So yes, if it has enough of a benefit to cost ratio, that's what a lot of those grants are based off of. And in that case, we had a lot of homes in the floodplain over there, and this project helped remove a lot of them from that flood. So yes, we do get federal funding for some of our projects. Cool. So stormwater quality, kind of a whole different animal, and kind of a whole different set of regulations that need to be. So again, kind of starting on the far side of the circle and working around. So stormwater permit requirements. So to comply with the Clean Water Act, the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality works with the cities within Texas to permit stormwater discharges into the waters of the U.S. What are the waters of the U.S.? For our purposes, it's our creeks. It's Farmers Branch Creek, it's Rawhide Creek, it's Cokes Creek. It's basically anywhere there's a permanent stand of water, more or less, is waters of the U.S. to kind of simplify it down. And to release our stormwater into these creeks, we have to have this permit. And this permit makes us do a bunch of different activities and enforce regulations to make sure the stormwater runoff coming from our pipes, from our streets, is relatively clean. And a lot of what we do from a stormwater quality perspective is due to those requirements. It's due to the permit requirements set forth by the state and set forth by the EPA. So one of those big pieces is illicit discharge elimination. What is illicit discharge? It's basically any pollutant that's been released into our storm system or streets that shouldn't be making its way to our creeks. So think an oil spill, think a bunch of yard waste that's been dumped somewhere. What we're tasked with doing as a city is going out and making sure that we address where that illicit discharge is coming from, if we can, and remove it if we can. A lot of this relies on either our field staff or citizens calling in or submitting a FBTX notification to us to alert us, hey, there's this spill over on the west side of town and stuff like that. Another big piece is construction regulation. So as things get built, tears up a bunch of dirt, you've got heavy equipment, lots of hydraulic lines that can burst, stuff like that. So as a part of the construction process, there's a lot of management practices that contractors are obligated to follow. And it's our job to make sure they're following them. And our job to make sure that they adjust their practices if necessary, if they aren't following it. In the case that we talked to contractors, there's a problem, doesn't get fixed, the city does have the power to issue violations, citations, and stop work orders until the issue is addressed. And then one of the other pieces is public education, something kind of like this, but there's actual requirements as a part of our stormwater permit to do public education. So next month, I'll be hosting a little table at the Fish and Fun event, because that's one of our requirements as a part of our permit, amongst other public education events. Next slide. So here's a couple other photos from what this side of the world looks like. So top corner over there, this happened just a couple weeks ago. We got a call in from code actually, because they got this reported to them of, I don't even know what the substance was, but it's black and it was gross and it was on a residential street. So it was our job to go out there and get these barrels tipped back up, get them taken away, get absorbent powder put all over this black stuff and sweep it up and scoop it out and get it out of there. In the bottom corner over there, this is kind of a fun example. Well, it's not fun, but it's an example. Somebody had set up or is running a mobile car washing operation. And technically it is against our stormwater ordinance. The runoff from this, you've got soaps in it that carries a lot of nutrients that can cause algal blooms, let alone all the stuff that comes off your car, stuff like that. We do allow some degree of residents washing their cars, but a mobile car wash like this, most actual businesses, as far as car washes, brick and mortar ones, their water is actually diverted to the sanitary sewer. It actually gets treated down the line. It's not something that's allowed to kind of sheet flow, but unfortunately, I didn't quite catch them in time, but all I left was the suds. But that's kind of what we're obligated to go and check. Top corner here, this is kind of an example of a bad construction site. You can see all the sediment there. Typically, you'll see on a lot of sites what we call silt fence. It's either like a little black or orange fence that kind of runs along the perimeter. That's meant to keep the sediment like this from getting out there. In this case, they're doing a poor job. I think I took this from a folder from a couple of years ago from a report of this not being in compliance. And then for a public education example, NCTCOG, or the North Central Texas Council of Governments, has promoted this Do the Right Thing campaign. Dog waste has a lot of bacteria and potential parasites in it, and we don't want that to be getting into our water. So the best thing is to pick it up. You might think, oh, it's good fertilizer. Well, the benefits of picking it up outweigh the benefits of leaving it there. And also, if you're in a public space, it's just the right thing to do. So that's an example of that. So we give out little doggy bag holders at the animal shelter. I think some of them say Do the Right Thing, or at least they used to. But this is an example of kind of the public education initiatives that we do. So what are more green initiatives? So what we're currently doing, what has currently been done, even preceding when I've gotten here. We do have some grow zones along Farmers Branch Creek in some of our parks. Actually, I found one the other day. Unfortunately, the sign is kind of overgrown, but there's literally a sign there that says it's a grow zone, which I guess is kind of a good thing if it was allowed to grow so well that it grew past the sign. But we do have some of those. Obviously, having vegetation along our creeks is very beneficial for a lot of different reasons, between erosion protection, pollutant filtering, habitat for wildlife. We also we have ordinances that allow property owners who live along waterways to allow their vegetation to grow along the creeks. Some of them get worried if they don't mow their backyard, they'll get called into code. That's not the case. We allow for people to let the creeks grow. And that's in our ordinances to allow for that to happen. I provided some guidance to our Parks and Recreation Department. They've talked to me about grow zones along Rawhide Creek. We haven't quite got to the implementation stage, but we have been discussing kind of where and how wide and kind of those items for Rawhide Creek, specifically in our park that runs there. And then our stormwater permit regulations, that's kind of a freebie because we have to do that. We're obligated to do those. And here are some ideas of work that I think could be done. So consider more green options for erosion control projects along creeks. So as I mentioned, when I was talking about our capital improvement projects, a lot of what we're doing, a lot of what we're spending our funds are is reinforcing and repairing creek beds where it's really eroded away and it's threatening infrastructure or it's threatening homes, or buildings and stuff like that. And a lot of times those projects are done with gabion walls. So you've seen those. A lot of them are, if you look down Rawhide Creek and kind of what bounds Rawhide Creek, it's those baskets filled with rock. Or we use concrete, or we use kind of these big blocks of rock, stuff like that. Not really green options, definitely very in the gray camp of things. But there is a lot of work being done to figure out how those kinds of projects can be done in a more green way. So think of vegetated bank that's been engineered to be more stable than it otherwise would be. Things along those lines, and I would like for us to consider those kind of moving forward where we can. Now, sometimes you're limited by space, and sometimes you're limited by budget. Yeah. But where we can, I'd love to do that. Identify and create more grow zones. Kind of working on this already with what I've already talked to our Parks and Rec department about Rawhide Creek. But yeah, the gears haven't quite started turning on that in fervor, but it's something we're looking to do. Continue doing more public outreach and involvement in stormwater quality initiatives. And if it's something that your group is interested in, there are options for us to do stuff like a community cleanup, stuff like that. That could be a good thing for us to do. Private development requirements. We don't require private developments to implement stormwater quality practices. So what I mean by that, like separate from during the construction phase, like we have requirements for that, making sure they're not releasing secondary pollutants during that phase. But once they're built, there's no quality measures that they're required to put in place. So a good example in Texas is like the city of Austin. The city of Austin requires a lot of different water quality criteria be met for private development. A lot of times what that looks like is when they're required to build detention ponds, they'll have a separate pond for water quality to have it infiltrate or to be filtered or something to that degree. In North Texas, these kinds of initiatives have been slow to catch on.
So when you're saying like private development, are you talking like the multifamily?
Exactly. So this wouldn't be requirements on, an infill lot getting redeveloped. This would be, a new apartment building, a new warehouse, something to that degree. I should probably put commercial development is probably the more correct one. But pursue potential outside funding opportunities. Like I said, stormwater funds are limited, and a lot of times those dollars have to be spent on the more gray projects that make sure that water gets downstream and homes don't flood or fall into the creek. And so we could do some work to try and seek some of those outside funding opportunities. Unfortunately, being in Texas, they're a little bit hit or miss, but there are opportunities out there to try and pursue these kind of funding opportunities. They do exist. And then pursue initiatives for our own residents to install their own green infrastructure. So think rain barrels, think rain gardens, amongst other examples. One kind of popular program that I'd like to see if we could initiate is several cities actually around here do kind of an incentivized rain barrel program where they kind of mass order rain barrels from this company. You order through the city and they distribute them to the residents at a discounted rate to what they would otherwise be. So something that I'm very interested in looking to try and help our residents become a little bit more involved in that kind of program. Okay, side. So, oh yeah, go ahead.
I should probably know, what is the benefit of rain barrels? What would you do with the rain barrel?
Yes, so rain barrels is more of a water conservation initiative where basically you connect this barrel, like this 55-gallon barrel, to one of your downspouts of your house or something like that. And so when it rains, it collects in that barrel, the barrel fills up, it'll overflow. You'll have this barrel full of water so that when you've got dry spells, you're not using or drinking water to water your lawn or garden, stuff like that. So that's it. But also, it helps with the amount of runoff that comes off of properties. If you're storing, theoretically, if every house had 55-gallon barrel storing rainwater, there would be less water going to our waterways. And that helps from a drainage perspective.
And I know we had a recommendation that went to council about rain barrels.
Yeah, quite a while ago, they were looking at the code to allow rain barrels in the front of the lawns. And as far as my last follow-up, that hasn't gone anywhere. So right now, that'd be something we could talk about too, is if we're wanting to do one of these programs, we need to probably push that ordinance back. Because right now, I think it's only allowed outside of the public view, public right of way.
It's like in your.
Gotcha.
behind the house.
Aesthetically.
Yeah, that was brought from code enforcement to this group, and they provided recommendations for presentation, but it kind of sputtered, I guess, when it got to council.
Yes. Question,
Mhm.
has anyone done a study on organic of the wastewater or runoff water? What the cost is to process it back into the water? For example, let's say lawn care. A lot of that water is runoff. So we had an initiative. We did the audit. The city would pay for the audit. They would make the correction. Have y'all done any study on how much money does it cost to process the water back into drinking or?
No, at least from a city standpoint, I don't think we've done a study kind of like that. I'm curious if one of the other regulatory agencies like a TRA, Trinity River Authority, has done something like that. That's a very good question, a very good metric to look at. But from a city perspective, I don't think we've done that.
Well, the reason I was saying is because we have this whole discussion on rainwater. If we could put it in front of the city council, like every gallon of rainwater on the barrels that we save, we're saving the city this much money. And their ears will perk up. And they'll be able to say, oh, let's do something about it.
Does the stormwater go through a process like a filtering facility before it goes into the Trinity?
So the stormwater does not.
So either.
So the cost savings would be more from a drinking water perspective and treatment of that water and how much it would cost the city to process that. And if you took X many rain barrels by X many houses, how much would it save the city from that standpoint? I think it would be more from the drinking water perspective, not being used on landscaping. That's part of why we have the stormwater permit, is because our stormwater is not treated. So we have to maintain certain standards to keep it relatively clean when we can.
But to the incentives for residents to install their own green infrastructure, I mean, what I would say is the concept is you want to slow down the water from runoff so that not as much is getting into the creek as fast. It's kind of putting some more life or timeline in it.
Mhm.
And from that perspective, how, like, by slowing down the flow, you're elongating the life of the stormwater drainage system because it's not overtaxed. You're not dealing with the same rate of erosion. You're not dealing with the same, problems around the existing infrastructure that's getting compromised because the water's not building up, such a high flow capacity that causes more damage. It's going faster. So there would be a way to monetize it as far as like cost savings. It would just be a little bit more creative.
Eddie's Farmers Branch.
You know what I'm saying? It'd be like a
1900 speaker.
calculus. To your point. That was the thing.
Yeah, the reason I'm saying that is even though they're not processing it, there's a cost involved in maintaining and managing.
Mhm.
So anything that we can show the city council that there is a cost saving to them, or there is basically runoff. Let's say, for example, every 10 years, you have to replace a pipe. A runoff pipe. Right? You basically can prove to the council that hey, every 10 years, this is what it costs. And if we did this program, just the rainback program, it's gonna save part of that. We don't know exactly
Mhm.
You want to say. Those are some of the things that when you talk about green initiative, it's not just basically planting more trees. It's basically trying to get the cost out by having support that support the green initiative.
I agree. Yeah, and I think that's a great point because, yeah, we have very, defined and concrete costs for what we spend to fix the problems. And so, and they are expensive. And so having kind of some of these be a cost savings, not sure if we can do the calculus, figure out exactly by gallon how much it would save us. But, along the lines of, especially this last one of these things is kind of tied into, and one of the things I've talked with another resident about is incentives for vegetating the creek and supporting their attempts to revegetate the creek, which would save us money as a city if we didn't have to eventually down the line do an erosion control project there, put in a gabion wall that costs millions of dollars. So I like kind of that train of thought, and there's certainly some benefit with this that could provide actual cost savings in the end, albeit in probably a more, not definite terms, because it would be pretty hard to quantify at this point on that. But I like that train of thought, and I think it's valuable.
Question to you, are there areas in Commerce Branch where there's not sufficient sufficient outlets for small? Have you all done anything like that? Any like that?
So yes, yeah, so, there's certainly drainage deficiencies in lots of parts of the city. And a lot of times we look at them on a case by case basis. For Farmers Branch Creek though, we have a master drainage plan that we had a consultant put together around I think the final draft was sent in 2018. Which that's where a lot of our creek projects for Farmers Branch Creek has come from. Unfortunately, because we're so built out, and because homes are already built, bridges are already built, stuff like that, those deficiencies in drainage capacity are a little bit harder to address. But a good example of where we're actually able to kind of try and solve that issue. So we're about to initiate a project on Valley View Lane, basically right by City Hall, where that storm drainage system under Valley View is severely deficient. It floods in kind of the everyday rain event. And so that whole storm sewer system is getting upgraded. And it's kind of going in two phases, but they're going to start with all the stuff that's under Valley View. And then that eventually runs kind of along the dark train tracks between the apartment complex there. And then eventually that will all be upsized to try and alleviate that issue. So, and then kind of adding on to that, we are working and kind of getting in the starting of the process of doing a master drainage plan for areas outside of Farmers Branch Creek where we haven't done a study, where we know there are issues, but we don't have them defined and we don't have solutions defined. So we're starting that process to try and identify those areas as well for other locations.
If there's not sufficient drainage
Exactly.
capacity, you're looking at road construction, money, roads, there's only so much water. So there's, if the priority is to be efficient, this would be something that, I don't know how much funding you guys have. This would be something that the city council would be very, open to.
Yeah, I like the perspective of this is not just doing it because it's green, we're doing it because it does save us money. It saves us money on our infrastructure, and I think the biggest benefit would be from an erosion perspective and a sediment control perspective. One of the other big things we deal with is the amount of sediment that collects in our creeks and ponds, and lakes. So like think Malin Park, think the park behind the library, think the park, the Oak Brook Park kind of further up. We've had to dredge all of those ponds in recent memory to get sediment out of there because they're filling up. And doing these kinds of initiatives would help reduce that load and is a very kind of correlative cost to benefit with this. So I like where you're coming from with that train of thought.
The other way to look at the storm barrels is the money that is saved in residents too, if you know that they're using that.
Exactly.
It'd be interesting to see how that works.
Mhm.
Also, I feel like not a lot of people have gutters here, so I feel like that would be an additional barrier to that, because like a lot of the neighbors around me, they don't have, or at least I don't see them.
Yeah, that's
So,
true. That's
yeah.
something to consider, or you're like me when my gutters don't work. So, what can property owners and residents do right now? I tried to kind of distill it into a couple of different statements. So one is let it grow. So one of the big things that I noticed in terms of how we can facilitate more reduction in runoff from people's properties is planting native plants that have deep root systems that will actually soak up the water. You know, our Bermuda grass out here is not the best. The root systems are very shallow in those kinds of lawns. And so they don't do as well with absorbing water. They also don't do as well with holding soil in place. Whereas native plants that are used to the seasons of drought that we get basically every year during the summer, they have deeper roots that hold on to the soil a lot better. So that's one big thing. Like I've kind of repeated a few times, letting plants and trees grow freely along creek banks. That's what holds things in place. I don't know if any of you guys spotted it, but we put out a kind of a PSA on social media and stuff like that about lawn waste related to stormwater. One of the big issues we face is people mulching their leaves, mowing their lawn, and then taking the blower and blowing it out in the street or blowing it into the storm drain. While some leaves do get in the creeks naturally, when you're doing that kind of thing, it loads it up with excess nutrients, which then causes algal blooms or causes degraded water quality as that degrades in our creeks. So one of the things I do, and one of the things I recommend is just mulching it all in place. That's what I did when I was growing up and helping my dad mow the lawn, is we just mowed, and that was a money saving measure. We didn't want to spend the money on bags. We just mulched the stuff. And our lawn always turned out fine. So I think it's a good practice to mulch lawn waste, leave it in place. And then reduce your over fertilizing and pesticide use. Pesticide's a little bit straightforward why you don't want to overuse that. Fertilizer, that's where it's loaded with nitrogen and phosphorus. If you're putting too much on the lawn, put water on the lawn, runs down, algae is a plant also. That's why a lot of algal blooms happen, is because of excess nutrients and fertilizers in waters. So wherever we can do to reduce your amount of fertilizing, it helps. Yes.
You've been referencing algae blooms. Why are they bad?
Because they decrease the amount of oxygen in the water, and that can kill the fish.
Oh, the fish, they need
Yeah.
oxygen.
Mhm.
Okay.
They do,
Yeah, it could be.
Yeah. So
and all the little other little thingies that you don't know.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, the algae uses the oxygen in the water. So a lot of times you end up with fish kills if it gets really bad. Sometimes they can survive it, but also some of it's not very pretty also. Yeah.
It's just generally big.
Yeah.
These are little microorganisms.
So my next little statement is let rain soak in. There's this big push to get water off your property as quickly as possible. And as a city, we also try and get our waters off our street as quickly as possible. But one thing that can help us with all this, both in the quantity of water that's coming to our creeks, but also the quality, is letting the rain soak in. And that starts with building less impervious areas if you can help it. If you don't have to add that extra bit of driveway, every little bit helps. Or if you want to put something a little bit more substantial, consider using something that's a little bit more pervious. There's a lot of proprietary products out there like permeable pavement or permeable pavers. which either pavement has a lot of, it's basically concrete with a lot of holes in it. So water can kind of drain right through it rather than off of it. And pavers have space between basically bricks where the water can infiltrate between those things. So that's an idea. If you want to build a nice patio or something, maybe consider doing that instead of just concrete. Rain gardens, we already kind of talked about. Rain barrels, we already talked about. Another one is disconnecting or redirecting rain spouts. So basically, the outfall of your gutter, instead of routing it, onto your driveway and then go straight onto the street, you redirect that to go on your lawn instead, so that it has a chance to actually run over some vegetation, has an actual chance to get infiltrated before it gets into the street and sewer systems. Keep it clean. I'm preaching to the choir here in terms of making sure that you're recycling and using your trash appropriately. Use the carts if you can. I see some of my neighbors who just throw the bags out there. Pests and raccoons like to get in those and rip it up, or my dog likes to do that. So if you keep it in those containers, it's a lot more contained for the trash pickup to just dump it straight into their truck so it doesn't get loose. Another thing is oil and chemical spills. If you are changing your oil in your driveway and you have a spill, it's really helpful if you can pick it up with some absorbent. They sell it at hardware stores. It's almost like kitty litter. Actually, that's what some auto repair forums will tell you to use kitty litter, but they make proprietary stuff. It's like a clay that's very absorbent. That'll pick up the oil and then you sweep it up and you throw it away. Don't use a pressure washer and blow all that oil downstream. That's not a great plan. Minimize car washing. This just helps me because I don't like washing the car. Like I was talking about earlier with the example of that pop-up car wash, the soap releases a lot of nutrients into our waters, which degrades the quality, as well as all the sediment and oils running. One of the things you can do, potentially, is wash your car in a vegetated area, so all that water kind of just sticks in the ground. I don't know if we have any ordinances against that. Don't quote me on that, but that's something I would consider doing. And picking up your pets. We already kind of talked about that. Lastly, if you see a mess, help us address. If we don't know it's there, we don't know it's there from a city perspective. So if there is a spill, if there's dumping, you see excessive sediment or construction debris at a development or something like that, let us know so that we can address it. We have resources and the authority to help make sure that these kinds of problems get addressed. But if we don't know it's happening, we don't know it's happening. We can have our eyes only so many places. So here's just a few more pictures. So that's an example of kind of a downspout. It's a bad example of you're not directing it towards the grass for it to get a chance to infiltrate. You're just dumping it straight onto your driveway, stuff like that. An example of mulching your leaves. I thought that was a pretty picture of a rain garden. They can be very nice looking. So just aesthetically as well as water quality wise, they're pretty nice. And this is an example of, I don't think any of you are cleaning up spills this big, but that's just an example of the absorbent they used. I think he's cleaning up some, it's either oil or antifreeze or something like that, but he's using that absorbent powder and sweeping it up and not blowing it down. So here's a few good resources that I like to look at when it comes to stormwater quality. So EPA has a webpage called Soak Up the Rain, and it talks in a lot more detail about some of the examples I gave of what we everyday residents can do to help get the rain soaked up rather than down our drains. We also have our own stormwater page on our city website, has a little bit more specific information about our stormwater. There's also a separate from stormwater, there's also a floodplain and drainage section if you're curious to read more about that. Our stormwater management plan is also published on this stormwater page. So that's the actual document that outlines exactly what we're doing every year to meet the obligations of our stormwater permit through the state, if you're curious for further reading. TXSmartscape.com, this has a lot more information, a lot more expertise on native planting and native landscaping that is not my area of expertise, but it's a neat website. I like it. I've looked at it a lot as I've tried to plant a wildflower garden in my backyard coming up. So I've used that as a resource a lot. And then Texas A&M has an AgriLife extension. That page has a lot more, I'll say, technical references, a lot more detailed references for some of the things we talked about. They have a lot of different articles and educational PDFs. It's definitely further reading. It's definitely more in depth than some of these other resources, but I think it's a really good resource that our state puts out. Next. So that's what I got. I know that was kind of a lot to throw at once, but there's a lot to stormwater, of course. So any remaining kind of burning questions or thoughts? Yes.
Can you tell me, just not too great a detail, but what's, when I was just visiting someplace like one of those, at the Tampa Aquarium, they had swales, which they use for stormwater runoff. And it looked like there were some plantings in it, but it was more like just kind of, the hump, but it was for there for a specific purpose. How do those work?
So swales, are more or less what we'd call open channels. And so probably what you're kind of thinking of is what we call a bioswale, where it's very specifically planted and designed to be more of a runoff infiltration area rather than a conveyance. A lot of our, what I call swales around here, are just grass. There's actually probably a good example right back here behind the firehouse. It's what I call a swale. It's not a creek. It's not a big open channel, but it's where water runs, and we keep it cut down just to grass. And that's just a swale, just for conveying. But bioswales, they're more of they're kind of the linear version of a rain garden. Is probably the best way to put it. And so that's, definitely an example of what could be done in kind of more urban areas where you're working with more of these skinny linear areas of open area that you can do something.
So basically just like a growth area kind of, but along like the drainage path, but instead of just like a big floosh right to the creek, it's a lot more vegetation to absorbing and keeping the water from going completely.
Yes, exactly.
I have a question about some of the more regulatory, maybe permitting pieces of it. It sounds like there's a lot of sticks in terms of keeping stormwater clean and things like that, and things to adhere to and things like that. Like, are there carrots that you offer either? Like, I'm thinking like if a resident changes their parking lot or their driveway, thank you, like from impermeable to permeable solution, does that knock them down to a different rate and show up as a decrease in their stormwater fee, or like?
I know there's been some questions from council about that kind of, I think it's more of their questions were in the context of adding more parking, if we could have an incentive for them to do that with imperviousness. I'm not exactly sure what direction that's taken at this point, or if that's been reported back to council. But I think that's a good idea for kind of the carrot rather than the stick on the stormwater side of things. The only kind of hiccup there potentially is, if somebody does, no one's going to do a replacement of their concrete driveway with an permeable pavers to save on their stormwater rate. The cost of that kind of, yes, because our stormwater rate, for most residents is around $5, $5.50 a month. Whereas the construction cost of replacing your driveway is many thousands of dollars. So the rate of return if we say you get half of your stormwater utility bill cut if you put in a pervious driveway, I think it's definitely something that people should get credit for if they're doing it, where it's just have that big of a carrot to offer in that respect, but.
Family,
Mhm.
they put in little special ponds like Austin does. Would that be like, does that generate enough of a cost saving incentive that it would be a carrot, or is it still like,
Yeah, so that would be something that I would have to look further into to see kind of what's out there in terms of examples. I think in Austin's case, it is very much still
Stick.
a stick than a carrot, but they might have, yeah, they've probably have a lot more fleshed out programs, so they've probably thought about that. So there might be something out there. I'm almost certain that they do have a residential incentive for basically the example you just said. I'm not exactly sure how it's run, but I remember looking at a web page from their website defining something like that, because that's what I was looking at in reference to kind of the rain barrel program, stuff like that. So I think there are definitely areas where we can have that carrot, and how big that carrot can be is relatively limited as far as what the city can do at this point, but it's definitely warrants further exploration.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Do you notice any, cause like, thinking about like what residents can do, you know, because of the way that the code is currently, you know, for native plants or native grasses, like it can, you know, it is for a city in a park, it should be like, we're a city in a manicured park, like doesn't seem to be a very big appetite for a more natural, more wild environment. So even though like planting native grasses in your front yard might slow down the rainwater, you know, if you're gonna be bothered by code enforcement every spring because, you know, you're just letting your flowers. So have you noticed any opportunity for the stormwater department to like endorse some kind of programming that would allow residents a more,
Yeah, I think that's a good train of thought,
Autonomous.
and I think that's where kind of the ordinance for allowing people who live along creeks to let their stuff grow. That's where that train of thought came from. So I think there's definitely a pathway there that's happened before. I would have to talk to our code fellows and see kind of what they look for in that respect. I have seen some properties in the city that have a little bit of a more, we'll call it natural look to it. And it's definitely more, yeah, maintained, but it's not maintained as a lawn. It's maintained as some, yeah, pretty good shrubs and
right,
taller grasses. And so maybe what's needed is a little bit better definition of
like
where that line
where's
is,
the
like,
threshold? of
exactly,
how-
where's the
Right.
threshold? So I think that's a good line of thought. And I think there's definitely room for something like that to get more defined. Cause like I said, it's happened before, granted around the creeks, but can happen for kind of different areas and for people who don't live along creeks to try and help us out in this respect. I think that's a good line of
Because
thought.
I live off of Rawhide Creek, but not on the creek, and like my property is pitched, so like my dirt is all moving down towards the creek, like the creek's side of my property. I mean, I'm not, like I said, I'm on a perpendicular street to the creek, but, you know, it's all kind of like shifting because of the way that the water drains.
Mhm.
You're seeing it. So on the, you know, north side of my house, the dirt is like 3 inches shorter, you know, west side of my house or the south side of my house. And so, you know, trying to figure out how to slow the erosion of the water down just for my own self. I'm not on the creek, but I don't want to be like fenced in by the fact, oh, well, you're not on the creek, so you can't have more
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
natural.
Yeah, especially in regards to front yards. I mean, we have a little bit more freedom with our backyards. But I think that's a good line of thought for us to keep looking at in regards to what's the line, because I've seen it happen in the city. I've seen properties where I don't think they're getting called by our code department every day. that they have a more natural look to it. They have a more grown out, but it's obviously maintained.
Sure.
So what's kind of the line there, and how do we define that a little bit better, both just putting policies out there and also in our ordinance? And I think it's a great thing that I can
add that as a potential future agenda item.
Okay, perfect.
See if we can have someone from code enforcement come out and maybe have some visual examples.
yeah, that'd be great.
And I have a quick question for you. I know, so Farmers Branch has that annual water report that comes out every, I forget when it comes, like sometime in the summer, I feel like it comes out. Do you guys coordinate with them? Or is that?
So that's specifically for drinking water.
Okay,
That
so there's not
report.
like necessarily like, hey, if you take care of the runoffs, you'll have less PFAS or whatever you want to have in your water.
Yeah, and that could be something if yeah, I'm not sure. They report a lot in that quality report, so I'm not sure if there even would be room in there to throw it in without the document becoming pretty bulky.
Is the city the one that puts that out? Or is it,
Yes.
like, it's not
Yeah.
something-
Yeah, we put it out, I think we're obligated by the state to put it out. I think it's something that every city's, this is getting a little bit more into the utility side, but I'm well aware of it. But I think that it is strictly just to drinking water and reporting the drinking water standards and all the different levels of iron and PFAS and chlorine and all that stuff that they've tested for over the years. So.
Well, as the communications subcommittee chairperson, I would like to say I did not see your thing about the leaves, but in the fall, we would be happy to help when we table to promote not, blowing your leaves. And because that's one of the things we've been talking about recently is like trying to figure out how to keep people from bagging up all their leaves or blowing them into the street or whatever. So when you get ready to do that again, please reach out to us.
Yeah.
We'll add it
Certainly.
to our communication stuff. So
Awesome.
Related to that grow zones, I know the group, we've all been really interested in that and supporting that. So if there's
trying to
anything
figure out how to,
that would, if we can lend a hand, just let us know. We're
Gotcha.
super happy to do that.
Excellent.
Creekside Park. Creek Ridge, I mean, Creek Ridge Park on Web Chapel.
Web Chapel. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, the one that you can't get to without risking your life.
Mhm.
So we were just saying maybe we could just let it kind of
rewild.
rewild it so that, they wouldn't have to mow it, save money on mowing, get some native plants there,
Mhm. Yeah. I don't know what parks, what their future plan is.
Had some on and off conversations on that, and I think my recommendation would be if you could attend like a Parks and Rec board, or if you know anyone on that committee, start kind of plugging that in their ear, because they have the ownership more on the parks and the different things that they can do. So that would be a good opportunity to collaborate with another board and maybe try to push it through that avenue.
Well, and the same with Rawhide Creek. I mean, I've lived here since the 80s, and I have seen those gabion walls just get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's just like, it's not really effective. And I know people like to fish, or, people like, there could be little cutouts where it's like, okay, here's 20 feet of where people can fish, and then have the big tall grasses where the parents like to chill. It just seems like yes, it's been 20 years since they redid it, but it's such an investment to redo them.
Mhm.
I feel like there's an argument to be made that the return on investment for planting native grasses or planting grow zones, it's lower initial investment and a longer, reward life
Yeah.
in a variety of ways.
Mhm.
And so kind of to Al's point again, like if we can incentivize, like we can put a dollar figure on that, that speaks more, I think, to the council's concern of, keeping budgets. Using them correctly. No, that's fine. I'm done.
Hey,
Mhm.
I have a question. How much money does the city pay out to the county or to the water authority for, stormwater?
So for stormwater, we don't pay out to anybody. Most of our, what we call external expenses is related to drinking water. We get our water from Dallas Water Utilities. They supply our water. So that's where most of the cost. We don't, all the money for stormwater that we generate as a city stays in the city. And we've been lucky to get some federal grant money to do some other projects as well, like I was talking about with Pittsburgh. So luckily that's something that is generated by the citizens and businesses of Farmers Branch, and it stays in Farmers Branch to help us out. So we don't pay that out to the county or the state or anybody like that.
So what I'm trying to get to is a quantification, right, per
Mhm.
gallon. What is our cost to manage the stormwater, right?
Mhm.
If we were able to reduce it by 1%, what would be the benefit to the city? That's what I'm trying to get.
Mhm.
So in order for us to come even close to, from the city council perspective, they're looking always to save money.
Mhm.
So that they can lower taxes, make the city work.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out is what would be the best way to present to the council, like this, the
Mhm.
rain barrels. It's a very effective tool.
Mhm.
But what did the council do with it? We presented it and it's just like,
No, I like where you're going with that thought of, because there is a benefit to it. And we know just intrinsically there's a benefit to doing it. So how do we quantify that in terms of that dollar sign? What does that mean for, saving taxpayer money, which is, a concern for not only the council, but a concern for all of us. We like to make sure our taxes are being used appropriately and efficiently. So, I like that train of thought. It requires further reading on my to try and see what's out there and how maybe other cities or jurisdictions have approached this same question, because we're not the only ones. There's a lot of people dealing with these same issues. Everyone in the DFW Metroplex is basically dealing with the same issues we're dealing with from a water quality perspective. It's all very local and very applicable. So I'm curious if we do some research into how other cities may have quantified. It's very likely maybe City of Austin has already done some kind of study to that degree. That's why I'm here. Part of my job is I can look into that for us and see how we can do that and how we can come up with that quantitative. Here's what it would save us. Especially with something with like rain barrels, they're used so widely. I would be surprised if there isn't some kind of data out there for it. It's just something we haven't explored yet. So.
Is there any responsibility on our part as a city to get like the plastic bags and the styrofoam cups that kind of like rush through the creek during those events out of the water before it gets to the city of Dallas or wherever wherever it's going?
Yeah, so the short answer is no. And the reason why is the EPA would classify that as non-point pollution, which is basically very hard to regulate. That's the random styrofoam cup or the random chip bag that got thrown out of the car. If we tried to regulate that and track down every single thing, we'd use half the city's resources to try to do that. So that's why we're not necessarily obligated. Whether or not it's a good practice, it's certainly a good practice for us to pick up after ourselves. I'm almost certain that that's what Parks does most of the time. And whenever trash does come through somewhere where we do own the land, they're picking up the trash. I mean, you've seen our parks; they're pretty clean.
Yeah.
But we're not necessarily, kind of to your question, obligated to make sure our stormwater is crystal clear before it gets to Dallas or it goes downstream, just because there's a lot of small points of now. If it's something like somebody has thrown like 10 bags of trash in the creek, that's something we're obligated to go take care of and inspect, because that's what would be called a point source. A more definite, this is a big source of pollution, we need to take care of it. That's what we're obligated as the city to address and to take care of. All right.
Yeah, if there's anything
you.
we can help you with, as a committee, just contact Alex, let us know, we're happy.
That's wonderful. I appreciate you guys having me. It's been fun to kind of talk about this. It's something I'm passionate about. Of course, it's my job, so I kind of have to be. But my contact info is, at the beginning of the presentation. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions about these items or other stormwater related stuff. As well as I think my contact info is on those stormwater pages on our city website as well. So pretty easy to get in contact.
Thanks for spending your Wednesday with us.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have free dinner out of it.
Included. Always welcome.
All right, I'm gonna go a little out of order just soon, because I saw someone come in. I don't know if there's any citizen comment. Okay, cool, move on. All right, the next item is consider
Yes.
recommending, the city council issue a sustainability related proclamation and take appropriate action.
All right, so in the past 2 years, sorry, I'm trying to find my right page here. The committee has recommended the Lights Out Texas as a proclamation for city council. And they have done that the last 2 years. And so the conversation tonight is if that's the same program that we would like to do as a proclamation, or if we would like to maybe alter it to another sustainability related proclamation to try and get some education awareness or public outreach out. The second meeting in April falls right around Earth Day. So if that's something that you would want to consider to do either Lights Out, Earth Day, just trying to get some input, or potentially nothing at all. The one thing I will say is council is having quite a few conversations about proclamations, so potentially changing how they pick which ones to do. So obviously, if we recommend something, it's up to the council purview whether or not they want to move forward with a proclamation or not. So just kind of with that. So that was the main thing I was trying to see is number one, if we wanted to request another proclamation. And if so, are we wanting to do Lights Out Texas again, or if we're wanting to do something a little bit different? So I'll open it up for the group to discuss.
How would be done lights out over here? So
We've done it the last 2 years, I believe.
it'd be easier to get them to approve it.
So yes, they've approved it both times. And it's been a nice like photo op and stuff with the mayor or the council.
I think too, the question is like, given the move to more judicious desire of council in terms of these proclamations, is Lights Out the biggest bang for our buck? Or do we have the opportunity to highlight something like Earth Day? Would that be a better opportunity and use of our maybe limited opportunities to get in front of council? I have no dog in this fight. I know the birds were my babies for a little while, but I'm just gonna put that out there. I'm not tied to it totally. So whatever the group thinks would be the biggest bang for our buck, essentially.
What I found that when you all did the presentation on the council last, they saw heat area, heat map. So they were perked up a little bit about how our coverage, tree coverage. And then if you'll notice that when we were at the board and commission dinner, Terry mentioned that sustainability committee is the tree work. So there is definitely attention to that. If we were to do something that gets that interest and get them passionate, like plant more trees or something like that, I don't know. But that would be something that, because the council has had a presentation from you guys on our heat map.
And there will be an Arbor Day.
Yes, so we are going to do an Arbor Day event. We're combining our tree giveaway on the same day as the Parks Arbor Day planting. I believe that's Saturday, November the 8th. So we're kind of finalizing some of those details, but like how we've done our tree giveaway in the past at Brookhaven, We might end up moving that to City Hall to correspond with the parks planting that day to try to make that a bigger event, because I think, as you mentioned, like that piqued their interest a little bit. The tree giveaway has been a really successful program for us. Reviews, survey stuff that we've issued, we've had really good tree survival rates. So I think that was kind of the focus when we were given direction, like combine the parks event, the Tree City USA proclamation that's going to happen in the fall, and then, our tree giveaway all in one, I guess, larger, more notable event versus a couple scattered items.
Right.
What other spring thing is there? Like, I like the birds because it's like a spring and a fall, seasonal
Touch point.
thing.
And it is something we could still promote if you guys would like to do like a broader proclamation that maybe encompasses more things. We can still promote the lights out during the spring and fall migration periods. We can still, have the signage, have the, social media, e-news, print news, kind of that reminder for folks to take that behavior
When
change.
would we have to have the notification to the city for air?
For the April.
If we don't do this, what's the deadline that we would need to have something to flag?
Probably about a month in advance. So that's why for this one, this is about the time of year that we've done the lights out, because the peak migration starts I think pretty much right around Earth Day. So this is kind of a continuation of last time. It works out. So if we wanted to do lights out, the timing is kind of now. Earth Day timing is kind of now to get that to city council. But if there's another issue, that we would want to focus on maybe in a different month, that's also an option that we have too. So.
Well, I just feel like Earth Day, so many other people already do Earth Days. We don't have an Earth Day event specifically for Farmers Branch. So this is something that we can do at the same kind of time of year, but it's not focused on Earth Day. We're kind of out of time to pick anything else in order to meet that kind of, we'd have to put it on push it back to another time of year. Or to find something and then get it approved by us and then figure out how we're gonna promote it to the council, and then we're back to fall. You know what I mean? It's only 4 months away before we're talking about that again. So it seems a little like if the idea is the council is gonna get more judicious about how they're gonna be giving proclamations, and they may not be giving as many. If we know we're gonna get this one, then let's go ahead and do this one that we've been doing and not try to upset the apple cart.
I think it's something that is relatively easy to participate in for businesses and
Yeah,
people. It would be nice to know if there was any sort of measurable impact from what we've done in the past, in terms of energy consumption or.
It's a really hard one to quantify. There's probably some anecdotal evidence that we could just through driving around the city, but it's pretty difficult to quantify.
Yeah.
That's with any kind of education thing. You can hopefully, you can say, oh, this post reached this many people. We sent this email and it had a 20% open rate, different things like that. But
the point is to get people to care about something other than their own lives
yes.
and care about something that theoretically is not the ground, but it's the other residents of the earth. And so I feel like, the tree, the Arbor Day is incredibly important to not only the city's mission, but direct benefit, but so is being stewards of everything else on the earth. And if we've been able to get this through, I feel like it's an important part. But in the future, if we want to discuss other options, we probably have to bring this up in the January meeting. So we have time to think about other options and be able to respond by the appropriate time.
I think it might be a good idea for maybe us to discuss is having a flyer or some kind of post, 8x11 kind of poster thing, go to businesses, ask them, will they participate? Will they put this in their window? Maybe instead of just residents participating, or maybe getting a few more of the signs that we have, that are up at the city facilities and just kind of increasing that, visibility.
Isn't it also part of the taller buildings reducing, turning their lights out at
Yeah.
night so they don't smack into it?
Yeah, I mean, the only real people keeping track is Lights Up Dallas, and they go out during that period and they pick up all the dead birds and they figure out which birds are, and then they track like, as opposed to last spring's migration, what are the numbers this spring? And so they do have a whole like report on it. But it's specific to like downtown, so it's not really, as a suburb, we only have, a few really tall buildings. They're not coming up here to get birds.
I wonder if there's a way for like businesses just to like voluntarily sign up and say like, yeah, I agree, kind
Well,
of
that's what I was saying, like,
Yeah.
There is through the organization for Lights Out Texas that, we have that proclamation for, that's in conjunction with that organization. So they do, some of their own outreach and then have, places for people to sign up. And I think a big portion is like downtown buildings and like downtown Fort Worth, downtown Dallas, getting the participation with that.
Cause then,
So this one is part of a large, somewhat large, regional statewide initiative.
because then maybe after the time period, you could do something else. It's like, this is everybody that signed up, even if it's only just based on what they signed up on. At least there's some sort of measure of effectiveness to say, these are all the businesses that agreed to participate.
I love that, like making a stronger call to action,
Yeah.
not just, because I know the city turns out the lights, like all the municipal, so cities technically bought in on it. But having a stronger call to action with businesses and stuff, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
I love that idea.
I don't know if there's like, number call, but like, turn off your lights, You could call.
I mean, it's gonna be a door to like go to the place.
Yeah, or if there's a way to include like a link or something in the proclamation to say like, hey, if you want to, like residents could sign up too, and then you could say like businesses and residences, how many people, agreed or, signed on for the proclamation or
Or
something.
even just like social media afterwards.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. You just put like a little vote button in an Instagram post or something and, yeah. Something,
Something,
yeah.
it's all about awareness.
I'm hearing, keep lights out for this year. Put it on the agenda for January to think through possible alternatives.
That gives us time to talk about it. Go find new stuff, bring it back, talk about it more. And then it's like,
Who knows, there might be like, actually, I know this, I don't even know, it's like a month for sustainability, like, is there a month that's like green month? I don't know.
I don't think so. A month, that seems like a lot.
It's too ambitious. Okay, Alex, do you have what?
So on this one,
Oh, I need to take it.
we'll take an action on that, and that'll be the recommendation from the committee. So in case council asks, so we can just get a motion providing recommendation, like city council issues a proclamation for Lights Out Texas.
Yes, I motion for that. I'm not gonna say I don't
No,
want
you're
it
good.
again.
I'll second.
All in favor? All right,
And then, as we mentioned too, in the fall, they'll do an Arbor Day one. That one is tied to the Tree City USA designation that the city has. We have to do that to keep that certification. So that one should be
we're Tree City.
much more
Woo-hoo.
than
So
what we're guaranteed.
the signs that you have printed,
Yes,
they're still the same?
they're still the same.
Are you gonna get any new ones?
I've ordered some new ones, and then the city has they put out a median sign policy, which I think will be okay for the first go around. I might have to modify the signs and order new ones for the fall. But it should be good. So I ordered some just the other day.
Send me that file,
Yep.
and if anyone wants to buy a sign for their yard, I will order them,
Yeah.
like 20 of them or something, and we can,
Didn't know you.
yeah, you guys can.
What is the section?
It just has like a really pretty bird on it, and it says Lights Out Texas, and
Oh, okay,
it's
yeah.
like the whole thing.
I thought you were talking about Tree City. I'm like, what did I put that?
No, it's a sign for
I get
the,
it now.
instead of like SpongeBob musical, you would
Yeah.
have Lights Out.
All right, I'm gonna move us to the next agenda item, and that is receive staff updates on sustainability initiatives.
All right, I'll be quick. The Soul Smart designation that we've been talking about for a while, I submitted everything that we currently have, to the organization, and we have met all the prerequisite requirements and all the point requirements for gold. The only thing that we have remaining is, the council will have to make a change to the code of ordinances, and that's gonna be sent to them in the summer with all of planning's code updates. So as long as they adopt that, we'll receive the gold designation. We'll get that at a nice council meeting via ceremonial item. And then if they choose not to adopt the ordinance wording, we're still eligible for the silver designation. Same thing, just not as,
Is there one about the gold?
there is a platinum, but that would significantly impact.
I'm just
Yeah,
curious,
no, no.
ambition,
No.
aspirational goals.
It would significantly impact how the city permits.
Sure,
So that,
aspirational.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I'm with you. Always wanna go-
Yeah.
Always gonna go for the highest, but,
Try.
the gold is one that I, was feasible
Great.
with our points, so.
That's great.
What is the ordinance change?
So the ordinance changes, adds definitions and some clarity to, basically our code of ordinances, and says that solar is allowed by right, has a definition. And I think that's all the major changes. Right now, our code is silent on solar. So it's allowable, but it's just not very clear or helpful for someone that would be wanting to do it. But I mean, we already have, I think, 270 something installations in the city. We have the solar switch program. Yeah, you're one of them. So it's a lot of stuff that we're already doing. So it's just getting that a little bit clearer in our ordinance to make it just aligned with some best practices.
Nice.
So that's a big one. So we posted on that when those updates go to council, and then when we get the award, that'd be a nice one for everyone to show up to the council meeting on. Lead for Cities ongoing. It's a beast, but we were accepted into a 2025 cohort with cities from around the country. So that's additional technical assistance. So that should hopefully help me out. Greenhouse gas inventory, we're nearing the finish line on that. My goal is to get that completed by next month. So that'll give us a update from our baseline of 2019 on emissions, and this is using 2023 data. So hopefully we'll start to see some trends, and we can use that to make some data-driven decisions on where we need to focus for emissions reduction. Active transportation plan, we should receive the document from the consultants the first week of April. We will present that to this group at the April meeting and probably take a recommendation from the committee in May. That is right now planned to go to council for a study session in June and a vote for adoption in July. So that's been a process. It's been thorough with community input. It's been a lot, so it'll be nice to see that kind of come to fruition and get that plan created.
And I'm just gonna double click on that one, just because I think as a group, if we can take a look at that plan before our next meeting, since it's gonna be on there, it's been a labor of love, I think, it's been going on for over a year, tons of community input, things like that. So I think if we can have a really rich discussion at our next meeting, that would be excellent. And of course, you're always welcome. Yes.
On grants, we received our second EV. It's an Equinox EV through the Energy Efficiency Conservation Block Grants through the Department of Energy. So as soon as we took ownership of that, I submitted all the paperwork for reimbursement to try and get that to the federal government as quick as possible. So we're waiting reimbursement on that, and that'll be $76,000 from the federal government for those two EVs. The first one was the F-150 Lightning that is solid waste is using that one. And I got to drive that maybe last month. It's pretty sweet. I don't know if you ever when you were a kid and sat behind a golf cart and hit the gas and you kind of slam back. That's this, but it's like a 6,000 pound truck, and it's crazy. But they're both the ones that are being replaced are older vehicles. I think a 2006 and a 2008. So it's definitely helping update our fleet with vehicles that needed to be replaced. Not so great news. We had applied for the urban heat measurement grants. We did not receive the grant funding for that one. So that's a little bit unfortunate. That was for basically to have the heat sensors, the temperature sensors on the cars and drive through the neighborhoods and get temperature differentials. So we did not receive that one. They provided a bunch of resources that I need to go through, data resources. So hopefully some GIS and maps that we can kind of use along with the impervious surface data, the tree canopy data, So we'll still be working on that. We just unfortunately did not receive the funding on that. And I don't really think that had much to do with anything other than they wanted really different cities than they've done in the past. So they wanted rural areas. They wanted,
Yeah.
different things like that. So I haven't seen the final list of who was awarded, but it's something that we can, that I believe has funding for 3 years. So we will probably try that again next year. And then we also applied for some TxDOT trail funding for the Encore utility corridor, Inwood and Alpha up towards the city of Addison. That's pending. And then we applied for TCEQ. They had some EV grants for the 3 vehicles. So that'll be, if we can receive that one, that would be $69,000 in reimbursement for just those 3 vehicles. Water rebates, 114 toilets have been replaced since the program started. We've had 13 irrigation checkup applications. We're doing some more marketing on the irrigation ones, especially as we get into spring, summer. People start turning on their irrigation systems for the first time in a while, and freezes have cracked pipes or mowers have hit, sprinkler heads. So I'm hoping that we'll start to see a seasonal increase in that. Power Switch, the deadline to accept offers is March 26th, and the Solar Switch is starting up and signups are currently being taken. So if you're curious to get an offer on what it would cost to have solar installed at your home, that's a good one to sign up for. Both those programs, you can sign up, receive the offer. If you don't like it, decline it. There's no penalty.
Is that, kickoff?
Solar Switch is currently being taken now. And those signups, I think the offers will be sent out in April, I believe the 16th. But you can, even if after they've done the auction to get the rate, you can still sign up and accept the offer until July the 2nd. So that's a big window for them.
And do they include battery in that?
They have the option for battery, so they'll ask you about batteries and they'll ask you if you're potentially purchasing an EV in the future, because that will also help them size the adequate,
Right.
panels adequate
Okay.
for you. And to get the Encore incentive, if that's available, you do have to have battery in residential. That's been a somewhat recent change. Shredding event is the 22nd of this month from 9 to 11 at City Hall. Earth Day, we'll be having some signs at City Hall and kind of some online outreach. And then I'll also be tabling at the library just for a few hours in the afternoon on Earth Day to try to engage with some residents on our programs, our water rebates. So it's a time where people are hopefully thinking a little bit more about the environment. So we'll try and take advantage of that.
Is the library having some kind of event or you?
They're not. I just asked them if I could set up,
Nice.
and they're like, cool. And so I'll do that. And then City Hall will have some of our signage up just in the entryway as people come in. So we'll have the new infographic, probably a lights out sign. Just I'll try to keep it top of mind for folks, and it's timely with our Earth Day, Earth Week. Gateway to the Globe is the 29th. I know I've talked to Lauren, Lisa, Al, and Suzette on tabling. If you guys don't mind, maybe a couple minutes after this, I can provide a little bit more info on that. Another item, the North Texas Climate Symposium is on April the 23rd, which is I believe a Wednesday, from 10 a.m. to 5 at the Hilton in Dallas. If anyone's interested in attending that, it's free. I think you get lunch. They normally have pretty good speakers there. I've attended 3 or 4 of those in the past. So
Where is it?
it's at the Hilton off of 35, the Hilton Anatole off of 35, and it's from 10 a.m. to 5 on April 23rd.
April 23rd?
So they normally have a good mix of speakers from the state, some academics, some practitioners, and then the city of Dallas. It's from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And I'll follow up with an email to everyone with a registration link if you're interested. And then our next meeting is April the 9th.
Thank you, Alex. Getting rolling like always. Next item, receive subcommittee update. Built and natural environment. No updates right now. Communication.
We're working on some information for like tabling. So I got a QR code for the water rebate page. And I got a image, like the city has generated. And so I emailed those to Alex, which she probably hasn't seen yet, because I just did like right before this meeting to get the QR code embedded onto the little thing that they have, you know, and then print that out, have it at the table in events, when people come, they can just QR code it. I think we're gonna try and do a couple of other things like that for like pollinator garden information, maybe rainwater barrel, kind of just like some one page that we can have on the tables, and like, if you're interested in this, you can shoot this QR code and it'll take you right to where on our, either on Farmers Branch website or other resources that can help out. So I'm trying to kind of beef up the communications, database, for lack of a better word right now, my brain is not communicating.
You guys can say no to this, but would you considering taking the lead on the proclamation aspect?
Sure.
Like thinking through like what would be the best?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with Val. I think that it's important to not always have like a value, like a monetary value, incentivization. Like, I think that we need to be promoting things that don't have any cost related. It's just like, this is just a good thing to do for our faculty. Because our audience is not always going to be trying to convince the council that something is about.
ROI is not always dollars.
Right. So I think that, but I do agree that we need to like beef up the messaging. So yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anything else?
No, I don't think so. No, we're good.
Water conservation.
Nothing really, but hey, Alex, right after our February meeting, I saw the Dallas Morning News. Like, I even kept the window open for a month on my, in my browser, just so I remember.
City of Plano.
Plano, yeah.
I read that article.
What is it?
So they had an issue with the company that they were using for their smart meters.
Yeah,
That's something, I flagged it as well when I read it. I don't think that'll be an issue for us. Our utilities, they're aware of that. They actually, I know they had a meeting with the vendor, the one that we're using about a week ago, and then they're targeting a fall launch for the,
awesome.
the monitoring platform is the latest I've heard on that. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, thanks for thinking about that.
Yeah, there was an issue with the city of Plano where their vendor, like the batteries on the meters failed 20 years early, and it was a 20-year battery. So basically the cost, they had to hire manual meters for 2 years while they're resolving the issue. And it was a huge budget slam. So naturally,
Naturally,
yeah,
the obvious.
as one does.
Obvious thing to do is to go into full panic mode. Alex, have you seen it? Oh my gosh.
Let's get all the links from all of
I didn't know. I left them alone. I figured I could bring it up at the meeting instead of just like having reactions every day.
I wonder what was the name of the vendor?
Alclara.
There you go.
Alclara?
Alclara.
Yeah, that's a Claire.
Alclara.
That's a vendor we use.
That we use?
No, here is City of Palmer Branch is the vendor we use for our.
The next item, receive an update from committee members on activities attended.
Well, okay, so I was gonna go to the city of Denton's sustainability event where they did, they had a speaker on turf alternatives for lawn, Alex. And
Okay.
I asked her if they had a replay, because you could join it with a link, and she said they did not, because I was sick, I was very sick, so I couldn't go. Or watch the Zoom, but she's gonna look into it, but if I can probably give you the presenter, and maybe not necessarily for us or whatever, but when we get into the events planning of like, you know, like we did the compost event, like that may be a nice little thing to have. And then I'm planning on going to the North Texas, the Native Plant Society of North Texas. Their meeting this month they're having a presenter from the city of Frisco, which has apparently done a lot of investment on little urban prairies. It's like, that's their, like their little, their marketing is some kind of play on Little House on the Prairie, it's like Little Urban on the Prairie or something like that. Anyway, the person that has been doing that is presenting, at their plant, which is on Monday next week, it's coming Monday. And it's a Zoom, you don't have to go to the meeting, they have a Zoom link, so, I plan on attending that, but if anyone else is interested in watching it, and they typically do have a replay, I'm happy to share, or you can just go to the Native Plant Society and their website, or, you know, you can do differently, but, that's happening. And I plan to be doing that, so, those are two areas that, you know, we've been talking about a lot more recently, so. I think that's it. I don't think I did anything.
I went to the Earth, Wind and Fire Conference at Brookhaven.
Concert.
I know, I
That was a very clever marketing situation.
I will say it was quite a lot of people, had showed up. So it was a lot of people, not just from Farmers Branch, but from, Dallas and the surrounding areas. So, I've already mentioned Dallas, but it could be something we consider maybe a small sponsorship or tabling at in the future. But that could be something if they do it again, but we will definitely have to talk to Ted and Sue that because they're connected. So,
Yeah, for sure.
All right, anything else? All right, last agenda item is discuss agenda item for future sustainability committee meetings. Al, I've got you down for commercial buildings,
It's more like cooling down the city. What can you do?
cooling efforts.
If you can send me that presentation whenever it's ready, just I can start to put it in the agenda.
Any other thoughts? Going once, going twice. All right, with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Oh, wait, are we not discussing changing the meeting? I thought it was supposed to be on this agenda.
Didn't put it on this, I know Alex was doing some,
Okay.
collecting some information about when other groups meet.
Okay.
Yes, I don't have anything really to report on that. Basically, I think the main thing would be trying to make sure we have a consensus and make sure we don't have conflict with other meetings, so. Should there be time?
I was just asking if it's possible, because I actually have a conflict with every Wednesday, so. I just thought I'd pose the question in case everybody else was like, you know, but I don't want to mess with the corporate, so.
I thought we get to wind down on Wednesday.
All right, the price is motivated, so you have one person.
I don't have any other thing that would conflict with changing it, so,
Check.
yeah, I'm open to the discussion.
I'll provide some options and discuss that next meeting.
Okay.
Room availability and then make sure, we'll want a group consensus.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that everyone, it works for everyone. And then make sure that there's no conflicts with other boards and also try to kind of look at holidays too. So that's why we've sort of done second Wednesday because most holidays tend to be, latter half of the month, not so much on Wednesdays, so.
Yeah.
All right, then I'll say it again. Motion to adjourn.
I move.
All right, seconded by Lisa, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, we are ending 8:09.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone mind if I took one of these?
Please.
I've already taken.
You're